welcome to the first of our Game Changer events for 2014. Now, as many of you well know, and as Peter's said, this Game Changer series is all about bringing leaders in innovation from business, technology and creative industries, bringing our Queensland entrepreneurs with successful national and international businesses to this place to share their stories, their insights and the key lessons that they've learned along the way. We're here to understand how these leaders in building their companies engendered creativity, inspired teams, managed the dynamics of change and drove, as Peter said, remarkable growth. Entrepreneurs, the game changers, we need them now more than ever. Now, Trent Davis was an early starter. This is what you'll understand tonight. It's quite one of the earliest starters I've come across and has been running ever since. His pace, his energy, his successes make some other leading entrepreneurs look less than restless, and you'll hear that tonight. As he says, he's always been an entrepreneur. When he left university, he was on to his fourth business after university. His first successful business took off in high school when he developed a software application for managing his parents' childcare business, which he then commercialised and sold. After some other less successful businesses, he struck upon the need for reliable internet connectivity and developed a solution to reliably manage an internet connection and share it out to businesses while providing security and virus control. So today, Netbox Blue is a world leader in internet management innovation with customers on every continent except Antarctica. And Trent's working on that, which you'll hear tonight. Trent has graduated with degrees in microelectronic engineering and IT. He's on Queensland's top 150 rich list, which I know he's less than impressed I've mentioned to you tonight. He was Young Entrepreneur of the Year and was nominated as one of the most influential Australians under 30. So please welcome Trent Davis. Netbox Blue today, and what sparked your interest in entrepreneurship?
I guess I always had a desire to solve customers' problems. The initial customer, like you mentioned, was my parents and their childcare centres. They wanted a solution that was easy for the childcare centre managers to use and didn't require, back in the time, this is a while ago now, didn't require people logging into DOS and command prompts and all those kinds of things. So we did a solution for Mac. And from that, or even before that, I always had an interest in fulfilling those needs and converting them into real commercial solutions, something that obviously I can make money from, but the customer's also getting good value out the end of it. And then a few other less successful ones, which I'm sure we'll cover off in a moment. And then Netbox Blue grew out of the need for, like you mentioned, reliable internet connectivity, which in the late 90s, when a permanent dial-up modem was cool, that's something that was needed. People had one computer you could log in with. Rather than that, everyone in the office could log in at the same time and use the internet at the same time. How times have changed. And basically the product grew from there.
So where did the urge to innovate, to build a business, take risks at such an early age come from? Did you have a family history of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so my father, who passed away when I was relatively young, in high school, he started his own company, quite a different field in the automotive space, had wrecking companies and car audio companies, that kind of thing. So I guess I always grew up with that around me, and that was my role model, but it was just certainly part of my DNA, I think, the desire to run companies and take risks, as it were, although I don't always see them as risks, but take risks and come up with, again, solutions to problems, and whatever those problems are. Yeah, we need to identify them as the challenge. That's the fun bit.
So tell us about your attitude, your aptitude for risks. Tell about your view about risk taking.
So Realistically, I don't see myself as a risk taker, although to most people I probably am. If there's a problem and it isn't quite working out, I work about fixing the problem, so there is no risk because I can fix the problem. That's sort of how the reality is, and for me, my reality, which is probably different for most people's, including my wife's, and it's got me to where I am today, and I think I've learned a lot of lessons along the way, but it's worked out well.
I was talking to you before about Malcolm Gladwell, a statement that he made. A lot of you would know this one. The entrepreneur takes risks, but doesn't see himself as a risk taker because he operates under the useful delusion that what he's attempting is not risky.
That's it.
You got it?
Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty accurate statement.
That captures it?
Yep.
Okay. As you said, Netbox Blue provides this way to reliably manage this internet connection and is a leader in internet management innovation. Just describe the importance for businesses and the education sector for the Netbox technology.
So we started, like you mentioned, sharing an internet connection, but obviously beyond that, as people had far more access to the internet, things were much faster, and people started utilising the internet for non-business purposes, is where some of that basic sort of technology came from. It's grown a long way from there. So in schools now we can manage not only appropriate access of the network, so blocking inappropriate websites is the most obvious thing, but also appropriate use of things like social media has been a big one for us, and we'll cover that off in a bit as well, I think. But the students, when they get online, they've got a very anonymous technology in social media in that what they can say and do. We all know growing up there was plenty of bullying in the playground and stuff, but for most kids that stopped when they got home, and whenever it was done, it was always done face to face. So a big thing that I'm passionate about and where we've spent a lot of time recently in the education space has been around bullying identification, self-harm identification and that kind of thing, where social media is used for the wrong purposes, essentially. And because students are at home on their computer, they can't see the victim, and it's happening 24/7 as opposed to just during school hours, the impacts can be pretty full on. And we've got some pretty powerful case studies and experience in helping identify that, mitigate that, and identify not only the perpetrators but also the victims, and being able to help them in those sorts of potentially very difficult times during those adolescent years.
Can you give us a couple of examples?
A very extreme example is, there's a few. There's one example was because we look at content coming in, like I mentioned, there was actually a student, high school student. She was getting approached by someone in a very inappropriate way, and there was a bit of communication going backwards and forwards, but a lot of that content was actually getting blocked from her receiving it, and alerts were going to the school, the pastoral care team on the school. They then notified the parents of what was happening, and their police were involved, and it turned out this was actually a family friend that was perpetrating all of this. So being able to identify that, having hard evidence, which is obviously a challenge in lots of these types of things, meant that appropriate action could be taken, and potentially something very inappropriate happening to her was averted. And the other one is, again, a victim of bullying, saying they're going to self-harm basically to themselves, taking a lot of tablets, and that actually said they'd done it online. So again, it was identified, and parents were notified immediately, and they literally went up to the bedroom shortly after it happened. So it's a very, very powerful story, knowing that you can, do that sort of thing, in the real world.
Oh, that's great. So you started out with this internet security space with SMEs, the education sector, the secondary schools market, and then to more regulated businesses as international archive vendors. So describe this shifting product and your geographic focus, because there's been some dramatic changes, hasn't it?
It has been. So it's, I guess, very much a broadening of the product. So we still have a lot of SME customers, but the education space, we originally went into that space around the time of the GFC. So our product was a good fit The technology was a good fit for the market, and it was the time where there was a lot of money going into IT for schools. There's one-to-one laptop programs. We used to call it the ruddy money. That's what schools called it as well, where schools were given a lot of money to buy laptops for all the students and stuff. But of course, you've all of a sudden got a school that had a lab of 30 computers that were shared between a few classes to a school that's now got 1,200 computers and every student has one and they've got a laptop that they can use during class. The need to manage that has changed drastically. So we've been very successful in that space. And again, the social media management grew partly out of that as well. And then what's happened recently is there's been some big changes in regulation, ultimately again actually from the GFC, which turns out is doing very well for us, is the regulations, particularly in North America at the moment, are very, very strict around what needs to be archived and the communications that currently banking, but that's growing, or anyone doing trading needs to keep a record of. So we make it easy for them to keep a copy of all of that and put it in their traditional archive solutions where they're archiving all their emails and that kind of thing, which happens already. Because social is viewed just as another form of electronic communication, and there's very few other people out there able to do that, and certainly able to do it in a way where a bank or something can quickly retrieve that information and provide it to the SEC on request. Because one of the important things of the new regulations is if the SEC asks for information on a particular trade, they've got to be able to turn that around in 72 hours, which if you've got all this information dumped in a bunch of places on a bunch of different servers, it's going to be very, very difficult. It's a very demanding set of legislation, set of laws, which is good for us.
Exactly. And listen, with your entry to the US market too, there's some reasonable initial benefits that have flowed very quickly to you. Your competition doesn't seem to be particularly significant in the States. Just explain that.
So one of the key reasons I think we're ahead of the competition is we're using technology that we've been developing for 7 or 8 years now. And so we've got a lot of experience in the space in terms of how we work. This is again social media, how we work with social media, how we can ingest traffic, work with traffic. I won't go into the technical nitty-gritty. I'm a geek at heart. But we've got a bunch of tools to make that very easy and effective for us to work with. So for us to implement new platforms and that kind of thing, we can do it very quickly. And our competitors have to learn all of that, what we've already learned over the last 7 years, again, before they can come out with anything. So that's been a great opportunity for us to actually license it to potential would-be competitors, and they incorporate it into their product.
And your initial funding for Netbox Blue came out of some proceeds of sale of part of the business, the previous business. But since that time, you've relied on internal funding. There's no external debt. How and why? Just explain it.
How? Probably sheer determination because of the why, which is, I guess I'm probably a control freak, and I like being able to make decisions quickly. So one of our key successes is being able to come up, like I mentioned, solutions for customers, but being able to identify those needs and adjust to fulfill those needs. So a saying I like to, or a mantra internally, is focus on our customers, not our competitors. It doesn't really matter what our competitors do if our customers don't care. So we try to listen to what our customers want and interpret what they want, even if they don't know it, and come up with solutions to that. So sometimes there's opportunities there where we can very quickly adapt with only a couple of degrees change, and then we've got a solution for either another market or something like that. And that's partly where the archive opportunities come from. So we were originally looking at products that are similar to us, secure web gateways, organisations that were doing filtering and the like, and they didn't see a need in this space. So we started speaking to archive vendors, can't remember exactly how, but we saw there was a much closer fit, much better fit. So we very quickly started focusing on that space. We changed a few things in how we present the data to make it work really well into their systems, and within a few weeks basically we've got a solution for archive vendors rather than for web gateway companies, and being able to keep that control, not have to go to a board meeting and go through a bunch of approvals and that kind of thing would probably drive me a bit crazy. I like being able to just get on with it and do it.
So there's two of you, right?
There's
two shareholders.
Yep.
50-50.
Correct.
Right.
And that makes things very easy.
And
We can meet,
Exactly.
make a decision and do it.
And you call yourself, your title is CTO, not CEO.
Yes.
Why is that?
Because I like the technology. It probably hasn't changed in reality a huge amount what I do, but certainly I like the technology. And again, another one of my sayings, mantras is prepare for where you want to be, not for where you are. So I like managing the technology. I like coming up with technical solutions to business problems, and that's what I want to be spending my time doing. So although our finance manager, for example, directly reports to me, that's not what I particularly enjoy doing, but I'll do it as a means to an end. So my business partner, he manages the sales side of things and the sales team and marketing and that kind of thing, and that's where his strength is. He's much better at that side of things than I, so it works very well.
Have you used mentors along the way, or did you go it alone?
Probably not as much as I should have, but we certainly worked with a few people along the way. I had a good business advisor in the early days, and I didn't know, but his son's actually here today. And again, family, so my stepfather as well is into running his own businesses and that kind of thing, which is where the childcare centre side of things came from. So certainly pulling on their experience, but a lot of the time it's very much been my own intuition and gut feel, I guess, in terms of how I manage the business and making those decisions rather than looking outside myself. But by the same token, like I mentioned, in terms of listening to customers and the like, I do certainly listen. I absorb information, although I might not act on it on the spot. It's probably a good way to put it.
So if I ask someone from your team, are you a good listener? Do you consult widely before you make a decision? What do you think they'd say?
I think I'm a good listener if they get to the point quickly and avoid the fluff. I don't like to repeat myself, and I don't like others repeating themselves.
I'll be careful.
But if there's an idea or a concept, I'm always keen to flesh it out with people,
Right.
throw the idea backwards and forwards a bit, and see if we can come up with a solution. How would they describe me generally? That's a challenge one. Probably a slave driver, but we've got pretty reasonable working conditions, I think. We try to configure the office and what we offer in the office for the relevant teams. To the extent we have different buildings for our development team versus sales teams, you can make a bit more noise. But we like to have a bit of fun as well. We've got table tennis tables, dart boards, that sort of thing, so people can have fun where appropriate. We often play cards at lunch as well, geek, like I mentioned. And so I would say people probably respect me, but I think it's best to ask them.
Anything more on the DNA, the culture of Netbox Blue that you can tell us? There's openness, obviously. There's flexibility. There's ideas are explored rapidly and openly. Yeah.
Yep. So I certainly have an open door policy, as cliche as that sounds. It's a better word to use. A cliche as that sounds, I'm always happy to speak to staff about things and that kind of stuff. Something we were discussing earlier. Probably don't have a huge amount of empathy. I don't know if that's because I'm an engineer or an entrepreneur or both. But I try. I'm learning. But I do like to throw around ideas and concepts, and regularly the guys will be throwing me what they've seen, ideas that are out there and stuff. Of course, 99% of it you just can't do. We're only one company. But those ideas can weave their way into other ideas, and sometimes we can make minor improvements to things which make a big difference to customers' experience of the product.
So it's obviously important for you to encourage entrepreneurial qualities in your staff. But how do you select the people that work for you? What are the values they've got to demonstrate, the behaviours they've got to bring in?
So it probably depends on the role. Encouraging entrepreneurial qualities is a double-edged sword. There's someone in the team, I was looking not that long ago to be my, 2IC is probably the best way to describe it. And He was passionate about that and doing things. Unfortunately, he decided it was such a good idea, he left and started his own company. But, you know, all the best to him. But in terms of picking people, certainly on the development side, it's a pretty torturous routine. We give people a bunch of take-home questions. We expect them to spend 4-8 hours going through those. That allows us to, I guess, understand how they think, how they approach problems, and come up with solutions. Most people don't answer the questions correctly, but that's not what it's about. It's about how they've solved the problem and their general analytical skills, thinking outside the box for a given issue. And then our interview process, when they actually come into the office, is most of the day where we ask a bunch of the usual boring stuff, but we get them to draw up their design. Again, I'm going to focus on developers here, design of a software package, for example, get them to review some code. We all go out to lunch together with a few of the developers, and so they get to speak to them a bit, and all going well, at the end of it, we then say yes or no, basically, whether they can join the team. We have a saying that actually Google came up with long ago, who do like to try and poach our staff, is no false positives, which is basically if we can't find the right person, we won't fill the role. We'll leave the role open, because someone that isn't right for the team ends up costing a lot more than just their paycheck each month. So generally we get it right, occasionally get it wrong, but we learn from that, and the team we've got at the moment is pretty good, and we're aiming to keep it that way.
Steve Jobs was described as driven, would never take no for an answer, obviously. Is that you?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's certainly been plenty of instances over the years where I said, what about, we need to come up with a solution for X, Y, Z, and people would say, no, you can't do that. I never liked that for an answer, so they were stuck in a conversation with me until we came up with an answer to the problem. There's always a way to solve the problem. Sometimes it might turn out the problem's going to be very expensive, it's going to take too long or something. There might be business reasons to not solve it, but I always want to know what the answer to the problem is before we make the decision, basically.
And what are some of the biggest surprises, some of the lessons, the big lessons that you've learned in starting a business and developing a business the way you have? People,
definitely. Not everyone thinks like me. That sounds really obvious, I know, but picking the right people. On some of the previous businesses we mentioned, I had some challenging business partners, to say the least, to out-and-out crooks, basically. So, taking people at face value is always a tricky thing. So I certainly, I guess, keep my guard and make sure the potential impact of that individual is minimised, but by the same token, we also have to take risks, get them on, and make sure we can get the most out of them. So I would certainly say that's one of my bigger lessons out of it all. And for me, persistence is the other one. I've always kept going until we solved the problem. We had a problem just a couple of weeks ago, actually, and it was pointed out by my wife that I worked on it for about 40 hours between Friday night and Monday morning, but I got the problem solved, and the team was saying this would take 2 months, but we needed it solved then, so we got it solved. We did it. So I think that's an important attribute. I don't do that every weekend, thankfully, but I do believe it's an important part to being successful, is not the 110%, it's the 310% to make it happen.
So persistence, perseverance?
Yep.
Patience?
Yep, although it's probably not my strong point.
So tell me, let's just cover some of your personal attributes as a leader. Now, you would have learned some big lessons along the way, leadership lessons along the way, but how do you describe yourself then? I think we've picked up a number of elements already, but describe yourself as an element, as a leader. There's some of those elements and some of the attributes that you'd like to actually take on as a leader.
Yeah, that's a good question, and trying to put my finger on it is always a challenge. I believe it works for my staff. but trying to explain our vision, where we're trying to go, why we're doing what we're doing is certainly, I think, an important thing. So, and it's something that over the years, I guess, I often take for granted that people are on the same page as me, so certainly quite conscious with respect to trying to explain why it is we're doing what we're doing. And especially as the organisation grows, we've different business units might not know why we're doing X, Y, Z, so trying to explain it in terms of what the customer's seeing, again, be that sales, support, development, whatever, is an important thing. Confident, obviously, being confident in what we're doing, why we're doing, having people believe in what I'm saying, and making it happen. Obviously, if there's too many failures out there, people start to not believe why you're doing it. But if we change direction, we've got to explain why we're doing it as well. So that's certainly an important thing as a leader, to make sure people understand, are on the same page as me.
And just to, I've seen a number of leaders who have rushed to a judgment too quickly, haven't properly explored the ideas, haven't generated ownership in the decisions that are being taken, because they haven't properly brought their people into the thinking. And I mean, you've got to make a decision, but
yeah, I'm probably guilty of that from time to time, but I certainly like to think that I have got the information, and we'll often have the chat by the water cooler type thing, though we don't have a water cooler, but the chatting with people about ideas, concepts and that kind of thing. And I'll always chat with anyone about anything along those lines to help have all that information basically floating around, and hopefully we can connect the dots and something sensible will come out. Or if there's a specific problem we're faced with, balancing up other information I have to try and make an appropriate decision. But sometimes I feel there's too many variables to ever make the perfect decision, so just have to make one and get on with it.
And how important was the fear of failure in your success?
I think I mentioned earlier, but for me, I never really considered failure as an option. So it wasn't even consciously, we're going to battle, failure's no option type thing. I just never considered it, basically. And back to my own delusion of the world around me. But if there's a reason we're not achieving something, just coming up with a solution for it. So I didn't fail, so we kept going, basically. Certainly, like I mentioned, some of the, I guess, businesses in the past, for various reasons, haven't necessarily been successful, but nor have I ever been at the point where I'm bankrupt, selling my house or selling my car or anything like that. So I've always, be it subconsciously or consciously, balanced my risk ratio to make sure my exposure is relatively limited as well. So
how important is material wealth to you?
Probably more so than I'd like to admit. I don't spend a lot of money. I probably do spend a bit, but percentage-wise, I'm not out there burning lots of cash. I don't max out my credit cards or anything like that. I certainly like to live reasonably comfortably, I guess. And for me, some of my earlier goals, my goals always increase over time. One of my earlier goals was to make work optional by about the age I'm at now, actually. So I haven't quite done there for my concern, but hopefully I can knock that off in the next few years. I enjoy what I do, so I'm not necessarily going to stop, but I'd like it to be an option.
So what are your personal objectives from here, then? I was going to come back to that later, but it's worth exploring at this point. Yeah, so
I think making work optional is certainly a big one of them. It's a tricky thing. I enjoy what I do, so I don't mind doing it for my job. Probably an important part back to being a leader as well. But I guess just being able to live comfortably, enjoy my retirement. I've burnt a lot of years of the end of my life, I'm sure, from working as hard as I do. So being able to, I guess, have the option to retire early and live it up a bit is probably it. It's very boring, a bit plain, spend time with my family and that kind of thing. But I think it's basically probably what I'm after at the end of it. And probably taking part in other ventures as well. like I mentioned, is starting a new company or being involved with new companies and helping take them to the next level as well.
So what's your exit strategy, Netbox Blue?
Good question. So I see probably the natural progression for us is potentially a trade sale. So or a similar aligned organisation to help grow the company and take it to the next level, I guess. So we do a lot of things really well. So continuing to grow that quickly, but with a far more international reach, and don't have to spend lots of time on the phones night and day. To grow the technology and integrate it into a bigger product suite, I think is the natural progression from where we are now.
Let's just step back from it too. Where do you feel that, is there any other time you feel you really lost it? You feel at a point where you felt such a sense of, I can't get out of this. I really can't recover from this point. Just to follow on from a previous point that you made.
Probably not. Again, coming back to, I'll come up with a solution for it, basically. I see that as tied into the failure type thing. We've had some challenges over the years, and like I mentioned, chunky business partners and the like, but that was basically a case of getting on to the next thing and moving forwards. It was at a time in my life where I didn't have a lot of I wasn't going to lose my house or anything like that. So yeah, it wasn't a huge impact, I guess, to make that happen. It was challenging, but certainly could get on with it and move on.
Trent, in any senior leadership role, we talk about the isolation. We talk about the loneliness, particularly of a CEO role. And did you ever feel lonely in your startup journey? I mean, are you like many entrepreneurs, an introvert who is comfortable in his own thoughtful, creative space? Is that?
Absolutely. I'd certainly say I'm an introvert,
right.
Naturally. And I would definitely agree that whole level of any senior management, I would say, is relatively lonely in that the getting too personal with your staff obviously carries a lot of risks, as cold as that may sound. And working bloody hard, so there's not a lot of time for the social aspect outside that. So, yeah, I think that's certainly quite reasonable to say it's lonely there, but still rewarding in its own way.
And along the way, you've covered a bit of this, but along with your achievements, you've had your fair share of adversity, haven't you? There's no better teacher than a little adversity. So just take us through some of that.
Yeah, so something also I'd like to say is learn from your mistakes. I mentioned shonky business partners more than once, and we also had some very big challenges a few years ago now where our office burnt down, whole lot gone, shipped out with a shovel, literally, type thing. So that certainly creates a lot of challenges in a very short time frame with respect to getting staff up and running, looking after customers, even things like answering phones, even paying things from the bank because your little key fob tokens are at the office, they've all burnt. So that type of thing, contingency plans and stuff are all quite important. And I'm sure there's lots of other lessons, but there's no regrets is, I guess, certainly one of my life mottos, in that anything you do wrong, if you learn from it, it's a good mistake to have made. So, you know, to live life with no regrets is certainly one of my goals. Not necessarily there 100% of the time, but pretty close.
So how do you get the right level of critical thinking in your business and effective decision making? You've covered a little bit of this, but just take us through how you get that critical thinking right in your business.
For me, I think a lot of that's probably intuition. I certainly don't know how I couldn't put my finger on what it is, but certainly it's just following the gut and hoping there's enough information in there in my brain to come out with an answer. And if we do make a mistake, not being afraid to admit it and change direction as required.
And with intuition, you need experiential wisdom. That's there.
Yeah, that's it. So, and I think absorbing what's around me as well. So even like I mentioned, when I was at high school, I was selling a childcare centre management package to organisations, and this is running their whole business. So if it didn't work, they had a lot more to lose than me, basically. So it was important to get it right, but there was, again, following my gut with respect to how we developed the product, how it was sold, how I positioned it, looked after issues and stuff was a very, very important thing. But again, how I learnt that along the way, I couldn't tell you.
A recent HBR article, Harvard Business Review article, said the 4 distinct skills lacking in most entrepreneurs are managing themselves, planning and organising, analytical problem solving, and empathy. Now, how does this relate to you? How do you see yourself in relation to that?
The empathy is probably accurate. Problem solving, I'd say, is probably my strong point. That's what I believe I do a good job at. And getting tidbits of information to help recognise a particular problem and then come up with a solution to it. The other aspects, I'd probably say middle of the road, but I find reflecting on myself is probably not a strong point either. Don't have empathy for myself either. Yeah.
Okay, and planning and organising it.
Planning and organising, I mean, I think I do a reasonable job of that. My to-do list is always very big. I do try to use technology to help me with some of those things, but my to-do list is always a lot bigger than my done list. And prioritising those is, I guess, part of the challenge each day. But again, based on the information that's coming in, we prioritise those decisions and get on with it. So I'd probably say I'd do a reasonable job of planning and that kind of thing.
Now, we're in the State Library, so I've got to ask you this content too. As a company that primarily deals with digital content, I mean, how do you ensure that you keep a record of your growth and development? How do you go about that?
Probably rely on computers. Unfortunately, 5 years ago, it all went up in smoke. So certainly the physical records of all of that. We do have a little museum in the corner of our physical appliances and keeping all of those there to see what it was. But I'm very much focusing on the future and looking forward, so I probably don't do a great job of looking behind, but I also try to remember history and not let it repeat itself as well.
So talking about looking forward, where is communications information technology heading? And how do you stay at the forefront of rapidly changing technology trends?
Where it's heading is a very tricky one. Certainly, obviously, just the proliferation of mobile devices and that kind of thing, pretty obvious, but it is changing the way we live, what we do, how society operates. I don't think you could accurately say what's going to happen. I don't think anyone can. What takes off, who knows? The example I like for that one is Twitter. Someone pitching to me, how many years ago it was, it's only 5 or 6 years ago, saying, I want to set up a service where you can send 140 characters of something to people. It's going to be really big. I just wouldn't have believed it, basically. So where technology is going is constantly changing. I think that's part of the fun along the way. In terms of staying on top of it all, I probably rely on my staff for a big degree for that as well. They give me lots of interesting information, and my wife, she's also an engineer, and just picking up tidbits along the way. There's a lot out there, so trying to absorb it all at once is a challenge. We
were talking about Netflix earlier.
Yes.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's a perfect example of a disruptive technology. It's huge. My understanding is they're 25% of the US internet traffic now. Just revolutionised the way people watch TV, looking for it to come in to Australia one day.
It's amazing, isn't it, just how a few years ago they were providing DVDs by mail.
Yes.
And then moved into the online streaming and tried to sell, Peter and I were talking about this earlier, trying to sell the business. They were struggling, Netflix. Went to Blockbuster, which had 7,700 stores, and said, look, we're prepared to give you 49% of our business. You can call it blockbuster.com, and let's be partners in this. And Blockbuster just rejected it on the spot. 2 years later, tried to set up the business, and they're now defunct. It's an amazing story, isn't it?
It is, and that's certainly a challenge with the space where we are, is competitors can enter the game very quickly, and we have to adapt, and again, just having a simple board, being able to make decisions quickly, I think helps us in that journey.
So what would you say to, there's a number of would-be entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs in the room here, what advice would you give to would-be entrepreneurs in this field?
So I've got a little cheat sheet here which I'm going to refer to help remind me, but certainly learning from mistakes is a big one. Listen to advice. You don't have to follow it blindly. As a matter of fact, I'd strongly recommend you don't follow it blindly. But if there's someone that has some experience, wisdom, thoughts, take it on board and add it to the mix. For us, if we see an opportunity, we jump on it. I think that's very important to our success. Being able to identify those opportunities is a big challenge. The listening to customers, understanding what they want, understanding what makes them tick, what gets them excited, finding the sizzle, not the sausage, as it were, that's a very important aspect to where we are. And certainly listen to your customers as part of getting that advice, not just those people around you, and certainly not people, to my mind, not people that are in the same room as you all day, every day, because they've got the same viewpoint as you. You need to be speaking to different people in different places. And again, like I mentioned before, dress, act, and live to where you want to be, not where you are. There's no point in trying to be where you are and stay there. You want to look forwards, look to where you're going, and aim towards it, aim ever higher. I guess is probably a good motto for that one.
And just to emphasise too, two of the key reasons for your success are this laser-like focus on customers.
Yep.
And also flexibility.
Absolutely. So focus on your customers. I mean, at the end of the day, we've got a sign in our lunchroom that says our customers are paying for our lunch every day. And that's the truth of it. It doesn't matter what anyone else is doing. If you've got customers and they're happy, they're willing to pay their bills, they're going to pay your bills. So focus on customers is very important. And for us is that focus on, which I didn't touch on earlier, but focus on what we're doing. So we originally came from the SME space looking after businesses and their computer needs and stuff. That was distracting us from our core product, which is why we sold that organisation, used those funds to help fund just the Netbox, which was, in hindsight, probably a very high-risk decision, but we made it work and we're focused on the one product, the one solution. Although it's got broad reach, it's still a single core product, and that is very important, not stretching ourselves too thin.
Now listen, we have microphones with Christy and Heidi ready to come to you. So please, I'm just going to ask another question now, but if you have a question, if you could put your hand up, we'll come to you very shortly. We chose you as a game changer. So how do you yourself think you've changed the game?
Good question. For us, I think it's about, in terms of how we change the game in business and the like, is we've changed the approach and how we can come up with solutions to problems. We've got a bunch of all very geeky but innovative ways to make it easier for users to use computers basically on company and school networks. So at the moment, a student can come into a school network, first time we've ever seen their device, BYO being all the buzzword. We make it very easy for them to connect it to the network. We know who they are. We can report and ensure they're doing appropriate things on there, or completely hands off the IT team. So now competitors are scrambling and updating their marketing literature to match what we've got. So for us, it's very much about really understanding customers and coming up with real solutions to it, rather than talking about it and bunch of hot air without a lot of action. So that's it. I'd probably say again, customer needs.
Good. Any questions? Yes, sorry, John. Thank you.
John Allpass. I'm interested to know how big a challenge it is to protect your intellectual property and what steps you take to do that.
That's a very good question. Being where I am, I recognise there's no way to really protect your intellectual property. So part of our solution offering, I guess, is not static. It is very dynamic. So people use the product because we're keeping it up to date. The social space is a good example. So those platforms are constantly changing. Facebook updates their pages twice a day. with respect to how they're serving content, so we need to adapt to that. So for us to protect that property, it is essentially keeping that up to date is the protection that we're offering. We've got a few technical tricks in there. We do have a few patents and that kind of thing as well around both the mobile and the social management side. Actually, our attorney's here for that. But I'm certainly of the belief in the technology space, things move so fast that if someone rips off your idea, by the time you can realistically enforce it, it's going to be old technology anyway. So our goal is just to stay at the bleeding edge, as we call it internally, of technology.
So how important is it to have a good advisor? You got your lawyer here tonight. A good accountant, a good banker, a good lawyer. I mean, how can they help an entrepreneur build their business?
I think just getting that good advice quickly is important. Certainly our patent lawyers, we've actually gone through a few over the years. Current one works very well. They're good at generally getting to the point and understanding, similar with our accountant, very happy with them. Again, finding the right one to challenge and being able to ask a question, them understanding our business, being able to come up with an answer for us. As we say, we like to get things and push it right to the line, but just not go over it. So then being able to tell us where that line is and be able to take us there is certainly quite important, so we don't have to get bogged down in the details of it. Although again, I like to understand the details and ask lots of questions about the whys and wherefores of particular decisions that might be made.
So you keep changing your lawyer until you get the right commercial advice, or what?
Yeah, basically.
Questions? Oh, thank you.
Oh, Trent, I've enjoyed your talk very much, thank you. I'm
Cheers.
very impressed that I'm 70-year-old, but there's a lot younger Australians coming through the system with the customer focus that you have. In Australia, we've had a lot of publicity recently about the fact that we're losing our manufacturing skills, we're losing a lot of our icons, and we're losing our identity to some extent. I particularly have had a great interest in preserving the things that we've invented, the Qantas Air brand, which was founded in Winton and Longreach in Queensland, and now flies the world. I've had a particular problem with them the last couple of years because while I've been a great supporter of theirs, I think arguably they have the poorest customer service of a lot of airlines, but they have the best airmanship in the world. There's no doubt about that.
So what's your question?
My question is, have you got any advice and how do you think our bigger companies can change? If we're going to be a country where a lot of our future industries are going to come from service-based companies and things, we're obviously moving away from manufacturing. It's going to be all coming from China. How do you see the big organisations like Qantas, like Telstra, like Brisbane City Council, like
Surviving.
Surviving? Yeah. How do you think you can change that? You younger people coming through.
To me, I think it's again focused on the customers. You mentioned, Qantas is a good example. Fly with them plenty. The really understanding what it is that customers want, and I think being able to understand and genuinely take it on board is a challenge. People are often blind to the information they don't want to hear, but being able to really listen and actually really do something about it is the challenge. And like you say, we are moving towards a services country, which ultimately, to me, if you're going to embrace global, this might be ruffle some feathers, but if you're going to embrace globalisation properly, then you've got to embrace it. You don't go to your doctor to get advice on how to fix your car. If Australia's good at inventing things and stuff, that's what we should do. And we should compete in the world. We should treat the world as a global stage and a global competitive arena. And if China's good at manufacturing, that's fine, they can do manufacturing, and we should have services, but the government and supporting things should support that. The challenge that I have with it all, of course, is it's not really a level playing field. There is no such thing as real free trade, so we're not quite a true global economy yet, but moving that way, I think we're going to get forced to do it right, but customers are the ones paying the bills, understand what they're saying, really take it on board, and I think that's still a challenge. We have that problem internally with staff even. I have that problem myself sometimes as well, but speaking to customers and understanding where they're coming from and why is absolutely invaluable.
And Trent, just this gentleman's question too, just want to know, is in embracing globalisation, one element of his question was, do do we embrace foreign ownership of Australian iconic brands?
And that's a very tricky one. It's because if we were on a true level playing field, I'd say, yeah, I've got no problem with that. But at the moment, while it's not a level playing field, I don't have a straight answer for it because it's an exceptionally complex equation, basically. And I don't, again, back to, I guess I probably don't have enough information to make a real decision on that. And realistically, there's probably not a lot I can do about it. And there's not a lot of... so because I can't fix it, I probably avoid it more than maybe what I should, but a bit like politics.
All right. Thanks. There's a question over here.
Thanks, Trent. Very inspiring. You talk about your customers being the focus of your work, your company's work, and I love that pay for your lunch, because they do. But you've suggested empathy is not probably a strength of yours. So there's two questions. First question is, how do you capture your customers' voice? What tools, what activities, how do you do that? You've banged on about that all night, and I think that's great, but how do you do it? And secondly, my company is big on relationships with people. And relationships, you require a bit of empathy, a bit more than 50%, I reckon.
Absolutely.
So you've said empathy is not one of your strengths, and so there's two questions.
Yeah, so to the first one in terms of getting feedback from customers, I certainly speak to a fair number of customers. We have, as a company, we have even user groups every 6 months or so. I actually attend all of those and speak at them and speak to customers there, so it's a good chance for customers to speak to us directly. But also our sales team and support team, we have an internal system for recording customer ideas, feedback and that kind of thing, or problems that we've had. So the support guys are actually quite good because they're the ones speaking to customers about problems, coming up with ideas to fix probably not bigger problems, but smaller problems, just ways to tweak things and make it better and easy to use. And I guess, again, those water cooler type conversations about problems that someone's had at that point in time are very important because that helps me understand what customers are seeing. And although I probably don't have a lot of empathy, I just remembered actually at my wedding, my stepfather explicitly said I don't have a lot of empathy. Saying it out loud, but it's something that I guess learn and try to act on. So it doesn't come naturally to me, but certainly something I've learned to pick up on over the years. And I guess another part to it is, while listening to people's issues or challenges they've had, trying to think of, can I come up with a solution for this? Even though they mightn't say what the problem is, they're talking around the problem a lot of the time. So being able to pinpoint that, I think, is quite important, which, again, is probably something I've just learnt over time. I think my engineering background helps with that as well. I've read a few things on the brain, humans, emotions, interactions and all that kind of thing. And using that in terms of how I interact with others has been quite important.
We'll discuss neuroscience and leadership later, so we'll talk about SCARF and stuff. Any other questions? Yes, right here. Thanks. Just got a microphone coming through. Thanks.
It was just about two stories you said at the beginning which caught my attention. You were talking about cyberbullying, basically, and the first story. And in the second story, you said the girl took some pills. Is that what you said? Was that an attempted suicide?
Yes.
That you prevented?
Yes, yeah.
Right, because that's the commonest cause of death in Australia under 35, and the US military just spent $80 million trying to prevent it and wasted the money. Do you have something here that would be useful?
Well, we've got something that can help. It's certainly, I wouldn't say it's the silver bullet, but we certainly have evidence that it can help and help alleviate those issues for sure. Absolutely.
It's just quite interesting, that's all, because it's, medically they're failing globally, and if you've got something that's useful, it's got big potential.
It's certainly approaching the problem from a very different way to people have in the past, I guess, for sure.
Oh,
and technology, that's the double-edged sword of technology as well, something I haven't talked about, but it's got a lot of good and a lot of bad, and we're very much about balancing it in favour of the good side of things. And that might be good for business, it might be good for individuals, but...
I mean, to your knowledge, is anyone doing this for suicide prevention? Because the US military is in a right mess.
Yeah, certainly for that side of things. In terms of our competitive space, they're very much focused on that big corporate financial market. We're certainly the only one in the space that's focusing on that teenage type demographic, for sure.
So Netbox Blue is not so much about spying on people, it's keeping people safe.
Absolutely.
What's that mean to you personally?
It's becoming more important. My daughter's turning 10 in a few weeks. So seeing the impact that can have is obviously very important. And I'm actually a big believer in privacy and that type of thing. Despite all this talk of social media and stuff, some people might be surprised I don't actually have a Facebook account. I am a relatively private person, but so in terms of how we've developed our product, it's very much designed to only be identifying the exceptions, not the day-by-day type thing, not the day-to-day, I guess, mundane stuff that could be used for wrong purposes. Like any of these things, I'm sure people probably could use it for inappropriate things, but we're very much about being able to get the best out of the internet and not make it a negative in and of itself.
That's it. Any other questions? And one final question. Thank you.
Thank you, Trent. What's your advice for business startups? How should they approach to the customers?
So how startups should approach customers? Well, I think startups are the perfect time to be speaking to customers. There's not a lot of staff. Obviously, you're going to be, imagine the salesperson, the support person, the PR person, the warranty repair person and everything. So you've got a very large amount of contact with the customer. So being able to listen to customers is very important. Me and my background is certainly a challenge sometimes to not say stupid customers. They drive me nuts, which does happen time to time, I will admit. And I'm sure most people, when I was younger, I was in the retail space, we hear it a lot, but I think suppressing that urge and trying to understand what their problem is and what problem they're trying to solve is very important. And realising that the space that you're in, you are the expert in it. You are the best at answering their questions, so they're always going to come to you for advice. So embracing that and effectively making it a service, using it as an opportunity to be better in the market because you're willing to give customers advice for what you're an expert at, whether you know it or not, you end up being the expert, I guess.
Trent, thank you.
Thank you, Ray.
Please thank Trent Davis.
In thanking Ray for a wonderful interview and Trent for an introvert and a very private person, thank you for a very honest self-appraisal. I hope it wasn't too daunting for you, but we really appreciate you being here. And there were many lessons, obviously, focus on customers, came through consistently, an unyielding determination, obviously. But for me, the underlying theme as I just watched you and listened to you was your real focus on the future. I asked Trent before we started, I said, you've had amazing success for a person so young, and when you put your head on the pillow at night, are you happy with where you are in life, or are you restless? He said, no, I'm restless. And if you read a lot of literature, leadership literature today, you'll see that the leaders who are succeeding and the organisations who are succeeding have this restlessness, this desire to push on and achieve the vision of the organisation. And we can see, Ray mentioned Netflix, and there are plenty others. We can see the Fairfaxes and the Darryl Lees and many other examples here, where the leaders just didn't have that restlessness. They didn't have that drive to push on into the future. They didn't envisage a future. And I think, to me, that was really the underlying theme in everything you said today, and this real commitment to keep going. The one thing that I don't believe from what you said tonight was that you're setting yourself up for an early retirement. I don't see that happening.
I said as an option.
As an option, but I think that's just a mental option. It's not a real option.
That's right.
Like it's a virtual option.
Yeah, that's it.
It's a virtual option.
My wife would like to think otherwise, but she knows me better.
But anyway, look, ladies and gentlemen, would you thank Ray and Trent for a wonderful interview. For those who'd like to replay the interview, it will be available on the SLQ website within a week. I would like to invite you to the next Game Changer event, which is on the 21st of May, where we'll be speaking with an outstanding social entrepreneur, Dr. Dimity Dornan, internationally recognised for her incredible work in developing Hear and Say, which is making tremendous difference to individuals and families, not just in Australia but around the world. It's a wonderful story, and if you're interested in the whole idea of game changing, whether it be in the for-profit space or in the social entrepreneurship space, she has a great story to tell. And as Ray said, we're here to learn from people who really do make a difference. What is it within them that enables them to make such a profound difference? And we all know our country needs them right now, and plenty of them. I just remind you of the induction dinner on the 17th of July at the Convention Centre, and now invite you to the Queensland Terrace for refreshments, generously supported by Cloverley Estate, fine Queensland wines, and challenge you to be entrepreneurial and get to know somebody, at least one person that you haven't previously met. And there's no excuse if you're an introvert. Thanks for being here.